Yeah, or Brittany, did anybody hear about Mike or coming late or not coming?
I spoke with Mike Lane yesterday and he planned on being here.
Okay. He sometimes has connection problems, so. All right, but I know that that Kate is here for the
Here.
people,
Yep.
and
I'm
I guess
There's Mike.
hi Mike. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to call the meeting of the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee to order for February 12th, 2021. Thank you all for joining us. Good to have you. And we may get one more committee member come in. First, let me see if there are any changes to the agenda or public comment. Not hearing any. I didn't get any comment myself. All right.
I didn't receive anything.
Okay, thanks, Katrina. All right, well, welcome to Diane Miller from Cornell in Washington, D.C., and Kate Supron from Cornell in Ithaca. And I think we're going to be joined at some point by Charlie Krasansky as well. But welcome, Diane. If you wanted to, we were talking earlier about reconciliation and what that means as far as the process. So
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So, and I think, you know, Amanda, if Amanda's going to go into detail on the procedure too, some of this may end up being repetitive, but reconciliation is it's a procedural move that's designed to get around the Senate filibuster requirement, and there are a number of twists and turns in the Senate rules that specify what can and can't be included in a reconciliation package, but generally they have to be fiscal matters. So either something that spends money or raises revenue. And then there are various categories under that. And I can send you some background. Some CRS did a very nice report on it, good background as to what's included and what's not. And so the issue is to avoid that point of order and to not draw the filibuster. You have to fit within all of those requirements. The Byrd rule is what they call it. And so this gives the Senate parliamentarian a lot of sway over what is consistent with the rules and what isn't. And so I think that was the genesis of Tom Reed's comments, is that they were trying to figure out again how to shoehorn the Affordable Care Act, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act into that mechanism. And I think this reconciliation process is generally a lot more straightforward because you're just talking about appropriating funds that would go into various programs. And so that's why they had to create this program they had to create this program in the Government Reform Committee to sponsor or house the state and local assistance funds so that they would be able to, they'd have a mechanism for delivering them to the local, state and local governments. And so once you get sort of the basic structure together and it's tied to that budget resolution, then it's just a straightforward, there are still the rules for debate in the Senate, and then but it's a straightforward 50 votes up or down. Now anybody can object, and so then it's up to the parliamentarian to rule on that objection, and then the Senate is allowed to vote to overrule the parliamentarian, but that takes a supermajority vote too. So it's again, it's designed to be complicated on purpose, but again, the folks that are working this process are all veterans who've been through this many, many times, and so I think that they've got sort of figured out what pieces go where. I think the case for, say, the $15 minimum wage is a lot more attenuated than the legislation that provides direct assistance to state and local governments. So that's where they're going to be arguing about. And I think, again, Tom Reed's point, he was thinking back, and I can't say exactly what he was thinking, but thinking back to the experience of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where it took them basically an entire legislative session to figure out what they were going to do. But once they figured it out, once they sort of got past those Senate, procedures, it was 22 days from start to finish for that legislation to be marked up, voted on in the House and Senate, go through conference and be signed into law. So I think that's it doesn't have to be a month. It doesn't have to be a month-long process is what I'm saying.
So
Yeah,
is
my
yours,
my sense is that it's the what took so long before was the negotiation of what would be in the bill. So if we can put a pin in this one, Deborah, and there's limited time for Cornell, and if there's we'd love to hear your point of view from DC on this legislation or anything else. And hi, Charlie, welcome. We certainly want some time, and everybody's got to go by 11. We want some time to hear about the state budget too.
Yeah. So all I will say is that the budget process, the budget resolution that was approved last week set this whole process up. There's probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 committees in the House that have been given instructions to report back legislation. And so they're going to wrap that up today. This government reform bill for state and local assistance, I think, is the last piece of that puzzle. And so the next week, the budget committee is going to go back and put together sort of the reconciliation package that then they will vote on. The Senate, obviously, this week has been tied up with the impeachment trial. And so they're not going to start working on their piece of it, I think, until the House probably sends them something. But the target is mid-March. From Cornell's perspective, the fact that there's $350 billion for state and local government is, that's absolutely incredible and something that we have been advocating for. Every piece of legislation that's passed from the very first one way back, with CARES on down, has contained funds for higher education. At Cornell, we use them to support our students. And so this particular package is no different. There's another $30 billion for higher education. And so the formula, how the funds will be allocated to individual institutions, Cornell will take our share as it's allocated. And again, we'll use it to support our students and their needs. In that regard, I think, we're also very excited to see and, interested to see how it rolls out, the $160 billion for the public health aspects, because I think that that's going to help with the vaccine production, distribution, and actual administration. And so it will shore up those efforts. And I know that that's really been the sort of like the last barrier to getting back to normal, is making sure that that the vaccine is produced and distributed in a way. And I know that Cornell has been a good partner with Tompkins County in the local efforts. And so anything that they can do to bolster that, I think will be a bonus for the community as well. And I think I will hand it off to Charlie.
Hand it off to your cat. Hey, Charlie.
Oh, this is Nancy. She has no opinion.
Yeah, so I mean, the good news is, what Diane shared, the state is really just in the position of, I would say, most people in the state waiting, advocating for federal money. The governor is, he's acting maybe more aggressive than some people think he should be He's sort of claiming that this amount of money that's in the federal package isn't enough. And I saw, Nancy Pelosi wrote a letter back disputing that, documenting how much is in there that will come to New York. He, as governor, he does get to sort of count some of it the way he wants to count it. But anyway you count it, it's a lot. And it's above 15 billion. I mean, I think any way you count it, it's more than $15 billion. Now, he was claiming but that 15 billion has to come to me rather than go directly to elsewhere within the state. Again, we'll see how that argument holds, but for Albany, for our purposes and for local government's purposes, in early March is when the state usually agrees. The governor's office and the two houses usually agree on what they call a consensus forecast. This is how much money we have to spend. And again, in a usually year, it's a little bit of federal money, but it's mostly, how the economy is doing in the taxes and fees. This year, they're more focused on how much federal money are we getting and when. The when, I think they can easily deal with. The state always borrows money in the spring before personal income tax revenues come in. And so if they have a fix on how much they're getting, but it won't come in on this day, they can easily deal with that and they can put it in their forecast. Now, again, the governor does have a lot of say when it comes to how much they can count on from the federal government in each category. So he'll argue, oh, it's not that much, it'll be this number, but still he can't be overtly, making things up. So I think it'll be really interesting to see when this budget gets put together, how many of the cuts disappear at these numbers, from his own rhetoric. A lot of these cuts to programs, to agencies, to services just will melt away because they have this money from the federal government. Now he has some discretion on that. I've got some ideas on where he will focus those cuts, and maybe we'll hold to some of them. But overall, I think a lot of these cuts will disappear.
One comment, and I see your hand, Deborah. Amanda Spilsey mentioned to me yesterday that New York State would get, including K-12, would get 22.3 billion.
Right.
And he's been saying he needs 15 billion. Now,
Correct.
I think even more than healthcare. There's Amanda. Hi.
Hey there.
Are your ears ringing?
Yep.
Well, to actually see you.
Hi. Don't laugh at my hat. My furnace broke this morning, so I'm trying to stay.
Oh, no.
So,
Oh, no.
we're talking about this topic. Why don't we let Amanda sort of talk? I'll the state guy. I'll jump in later after she's told us what's going on.
Okay, we would you leave at 11, Charlie?
Yeah, I can stick around.
Yeah, I have
Okay.
to leave. I have to leave at 11. It turns out that Senator Schumer called President Pollock this morning, and so we have to have a conversation to discuss what they talked about. So
I'm free after 11.
Yeah, surprise.
exactly. So Amanda, I'll probably end up circling back around with you at some point. But I gave just the
This
very
morning.
highest level. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't have the heads up for you that I normally have. He called me this morning in his Chuck voice and said, "I'm calling Martha." Okay.
Well,
The other Martha. You didn't call me.
Yes, there's lots of Tompkins Marthas in his world.
Great.
so that's why I'm leaving at 11. So
I didn't
Okay.
hear exactly what topic you were all on, but I can only imagine. So
Yeah. So how much money is coming to New York State, and from in the rescue plan, and
yes.
the governor is framing it, describing it.
So I guess I can do a little bit, and then you all can ask some questions, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Is everybody sort of familiar with the budget reconciliation process? Because this is sort of a new rodeo for many of us, or at least to this magnitude. And I will tell you, don't worry, we have parliamentarians that are very, very versed in what they're doing. Those of us, in the Schumer world are learning some of this as we go. But so a week and a half ago-ish, maybe it was last week, I don't know, we passed the budget resolution. And that was, you saw that vote-a-rama that went all night until like 5:30 in the morning. And the final product is the blueprint or the guidepost to empower the committees on both the House and the Senate side. The House is starting as per normal with these matters to start drafting the legislative text. And this week, the legislative text from many of the committees has started to roll out. And by roll out, I mean, they call it markup. So it's the first blush, not even a final. And it's really important. I can't overemphasize everything that I say is predicated on none of this is final. This is like step one. even in their own committees, they will have they will have amendments, they will have debate, they will have discussion, and it hasn't even been voted out of the committees yet. With that being said, late Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning, the committee dealing with sort of the state and local pot of money and many other things, we got our first preview of what that looks like. If you recall, many of us have talked about this far more than you would like. We have been fighting for state and local aid since, I feel like before I was born, but not that long. And in May, when we were negotiating a supplemental to the CARES Act, Senator had pulled together a formula that was endorsed by the National Associations of Counties, of Towns, of Villages, et cetera, to be inclusive, to make sure that all localities of all sizes got something. And if you've tracked us and followed this, you will know that there were, I'm not even going to remember them all now, and I might call them by the wrong names, but there was like the Cassidy Menendez one at one point that heavily favored, either heavily favored counties or didn't at all. There were some that were focused and heavy on trying to help CBD entitlement communities, but obviously that left others out. And the short answer to why there's so much variance and how to approach this, and even interest in wanting to support state and local, I don't have the best answer, but I will say this. As you know, we're crafting legislation that's to apply uniformly to 50 states. And not every state constitutes itself like New York. So Colorado, where Senator Bennett's from, is an example that counties don't really have a lot of authority or power. So it might be a head scratcher to folks in Colorado why we want to make sure counties are taken care of. Where, you know, in another community, counties are king, and your cities and your villages, you know, don't have a lot of fiscal responsibility. So that's part of the deal. It doesn't matter. That's a lot of background. Here we are. We were able to take that formula that Senator Schumer kind of pulled together back from May. It's also analogous and incorporates some of the work that Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Delgado had done. And that seems to be the formula that's being used. Now, back when President Biden first rolled out his plan, he had about $160 billion in local aid. And Chuck pushed right back on him, and we rose that number to $350 billion. That number of 350 is what was included in the budget resolution, and it's what the House committee is working off of. Now, what I will say is we're going to have a process that's going to go forward. We're going to see haircuts on stuff. We're going to see changes and modifications. But starting from the rosiest top line of 350, as opposed to where we could have been at 160, is 100% because of Chuck Schumer, and gets us to a heck of a lot better place than you would have been if we had been starting at 160. Now we'll get to the better stuff. So what do we see right now? Again, this is just first blush. It means a lot in terms of knowing where we're going to work down from. But again, there's going to be a whole reconciliation process that has to happen. The Senate has to do their work. So these numbers are not binding. Do not tattoo them on anything. Do not start spending anything, but at least gives us a first glimpse of where we could be, which we're very pleased to say. So in totality, I'm looking at my cheat sheets here, and these are probably a little off from where they used to be. Ballpark. New York State in direct aid, and by direct aid, I'm talking like state aid to them and like K through 12 education, it's around $23 billion. It's almost $13 billion in just state aid. There are other pots of money for higher ed, for transit, for childcare that are in addition to the $23 billion-ish I just told you. There's another $10.6 billion that's for localities, in addition to everything I just mentioned. What that means is that all of the New York State localities will have a piece of that $10.6 billion that's going to be divvied up through the formulas that they're using that gives something to everybody. Tompkins County right now is looking at roughly between 19.5 and 20 million. You will not probably see that much, but I'm optimistic that we're going to be working at least from that part, that top level, which is very encouraging. That is as the language stands right now, and again, we can see changes. You're going to get tired of me saying it, but I have to keep saying it. It is a direct payment. It is, the language I think says that within 60 days of enactment, Treasury needs to release those funds. So it's not multi-year, it's not conditional on meeting 14 benchmarks as of right now.
All right.
That's a lot, sorry.
That's a lot. Thank you so much.
And the other thing I will note is that that number I mentioned, as potential as it is, not final, is not inclusive of other municipalities within your county. That's just your piece, the county's piece.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Amanda. This is really, it's a new day. I mean, whatever part of that comes through, it's a new day. Deborah and then Mike Lane.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. If we get anything like 19.5 million, we'll use some of it to get your furnace fixed.
That's an ugly bill that I'm staring down, but
Yeah.
you know what?
Um,
I will dwell on the fact that I have a roof over my head and not anything else. So it's fine.
Exactly. I'm still a little bit confused. As to, you mentioned a couple of numbers, 23 billion and 13 billion that New York State would be getting in direct aid. Could you clarify that? What's the $13 billion? What's the $23 billion? Is it cumulative, or does the 13 go into the 23? And why is Governor Cuomo complaining?
So the latter point, I can't really speak to. The 23-ish billion, again, just the first blush,
Right.
that is when we talk about state and local aid. So you think money that just kind of not directed to an agency or a specific thematic pot. That's what that 12.6 to 13 billion is. The other number that I threw in to get us to that 23 billion is a K through 12 education component, which is somewhere near 10 billion. At present, not final by any shape or form.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so in totality, I mean, if you want to talk about, because obviously, you know, being a senator for New York, any money that comes into New York is New York money. So whether you get some of it, you know, the city of Ithaca gets some of it, our transit system, which, you know, obviously is critically important for all sorts of reasons, gets money. That's all New York money. That number is like $34 billion that New York is going to see just out of this piece of legislation if it holds to what we're going to see in a final product. And let's not forget that to date, all of the COVID legislations that have been passed, New York has seen over 30 billion already.
Okay. But in terms of
Thank you.
in terms of the governor's budget, you're saying about 30 billion directly to the governor's budget and about 10 billion to education.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable getting into the weeds on the state's budget. I don't want to be mischaracterized, or I don't want to, but yes, I can say that there's a pot of money right now in the House drafts that go to K through 12 education. There's also some for higher ed. So Diane likes that. There's also, you know, some for transit, there's some for childcare, and there's some for just basic state, you know, revenue replacement, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so in other words, the K-12 is earmarked to education. So, and since that's a core part, the biggest part of the state's budget, it's legitimately budget relief. It's legitimately replacing tax money Cuomo has to find from somewhere else. So it's pretty lame. All right, never mind. I won't say anything else.
Our job is to deliver for New York. And I think as advocates for New York, whether it's you all advocating for Tompkins County or the state advocating for the state, I don't think advocates are ever satisfied. In fact, I think the governor said that before, you know, like that's your job to always want to say more, remember us. And so I think we're all in our lanes doing what we need to do. But, you know, I'm pretty proud of the work that we've done and what is coming to New York at this point. Again, it is only a perfunctory overview.
Right. Great. Thank you. Mike Lane and then Kate.
Are we okay with Diane? Does she want to say anything more?
Thank you, Mike.
Sorry, you'd think that after how many months of trying to use Zoom, I would know how to do it.
I hope we never get good at this.
I know. Well, the one thing that I will say before I do go off into the other meeting and figure out what it was that your boss talked to my boss about this morning, thank you. I mean, seriously, whenever Cornell has had concerns, issues, whatever, we come to Senator Schumer, now Leader Schumer, and he listens, he responds, and to the best of his ability pushes all the levers that he's got in his control and comes through. And so for that, you know, if it's not 100% of what we were asking for, it gets us pretty close to there. And so on behalf of Cornell University and all of our students who are benefiting from the funds that were put into the Higher Education Relief Fund, thank you very, very much.
And I'm going to jump in too. I do know the state budget, and it's literally that's where the money goes to these transit, higher ed, K-12. That's the state budget. Sure, the governor would love to have complete control, but even if he did have control over every dollar, where would it go? It would go to those places. So,
Right.
It's just like there's no way to describe it any other way. So thank you a ton for this, because even those dollars that go to higher ed, that's filling the SUNY budget. We get a lot of that money. It literally, even the dollars that go direct, I have to say it's better that it goes direct because we know where it's going to go. Sure, the governor, this way he can choose, do I use some of that other money to fill to totally fill some of these gaps or not? Now that's his call. But what you guys are doing is directing it so that a lot of those gaps in SUNY and in the privates and higher ed, they will be filled, no question. And then the timing, it's actually, I was saying this before you came on, the timing, as quickly as you can do it, great, but the state they'll borrow money. They do that every spring because the personal tax dollars don't come in until after the April 15th filing deadline. So it's like just having an idea of what the numbers look like by the end of March, middle of March, they're off to the races. Then you can say, okay, this is what we need to do. We'll put this budget in place. We're counting on this money coming in these categories. It's just the best news. I can't even tell you. There's no way we would have even expected anything close to this.
I think we could always have even better news, and I sure wish we would in a couple of days with some other things going on, but I'm not going to hold my breath there. Sorry, that was my unprofessional tutorial for the day.
Cool.
But yes, and in terms of a timeline, no, I don't have an exact one, but there are some real cliffs that we're up against, and I know that we always are up against some cliff that's fungible. But some of these are statutorily prescribed cliffs, like the end of the pandemic unemployment, the middle of March. So, the intention, obviously, and part of the rationale to use the reconciliation process, aside from the fact to make sure that we can use the lower vote threshold if need be, is that it is much swifter. And so, the goal is obviously to hit by mid-March.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I mean, for those, again, we used to use the term in budgeting haircut. So we know what that means.
Yes.
That means
Yes.
don't expect all these numbers to come in
Correct.
as, again,
Correct.
we know things will change, before we're totally done. But, in these, in those vicinities, those numbers are great. Let me just one clarification, the direct stimulus checks, tell me if those are being counted in your numbers.
No.
Right.
Well, I don't think when I say 34 billion is all coming to New York, I didn't put that together. One of my budget crunching colleagues did. I don't know that is, but I'm inclined to say it is not. But the numbers that I gave you about your state and local aid and stuff like that that is separate into state.
Right, exactly. Great. I think you're right. Good.
And those, I don't know if you're interested in where those are at right now. I mean, I'll let you ask me questions on what you want to know versus tell you what I think you should
Good.
know.
No, that's great.
All right. Charlie had said he had to go at 11. Kate, do you have to go at 11 also? Because we could take it.
No, I don't have to go at 11.
Oh, Charlie, you're okay too on time?
I'm okay.
Okay, great. All right. Mike Lane then, and then Kate.
Hi, Amanda. I just wondered on
Hi.
the state and local money, are there any strings that keep the state from taking it away from us in the back end?
So our hope and our intention all along, and what the senator supports, is to make it as direct and robust as possible, and with as few limitations on utilization, ensuring, of course, transparency. Again, it's not final, but what I am aware of, and based on the formulas that we had previously, some of it is direct. So I think for CBDG, and quote me on this, but I wouldn't, bet a farm on what I'm saying here, but I think that the direct for counties and CBDG eligible communities is direct. For some of the other localities that don't have a mechanism, because that's some of the challenges just in general. And even when we go back to talking about the pandemic unemployment, and there was a lot of criticism about what was it, 600, and how there wasn't a metric to figure out if people were receiving more than they made when they were employed. And one of the reasons and the rationale for that, which you could sort of extrapolate for this, is if you didn't have a system, a formula, and an infrastructure to disseminate, and you had to do a bunch of calculations, that would hold up the release of funds exponentially. So in the unemployment space, they were saying states didn't have, a system to do that. That could take 9 months to do. Where you have the CBDG formula situation already set up, the mechanisms that are there for county relief, I think those will be deployed and could be utilized, and that's why those can be direct. The rest of the smaller kinds of municipalities that don't have a formula, it will most likely be a pass-through through the state. But what I have seen and the conversations are, the language would be explicit to have the states function as a pass-through solely. So, there's not a lot of opportunity for clawbacks of those funds. That's not editorializing or criticizing, that's just reporting the facts of how it would operate. But again, nothing is final. So, we're going to keep an eye on this through the process and when it comes over to us in the Senate, because obviously it's no good to anybody if it doesn't get to you.
I
Right,
thank
but
you for that, but I worry a little bit about they could still take some of our funding away from other areas. And cynical me, that might be why the governor's complaining, as Deborah said, so he can say, well, they didn't give me as much money as I need, so we've got to go to the localities or the districts and not give you as much money.
I can appreciate that point. I have heard similar things advance throughout the time that we've all been dealing with various forms of aid. I don't have an opinion that I want to say or not say, but I know that the intention is to have local aid be available and to have it be delivered in as most accessible and usable way as possible.
If I could jump in, it's interesting. When the governor presented his budget on higher ed, there's a source of funding. It's called Aid to Independent Colleges, Universities, Unrestricted. It's called Bundy Aid. That's the nickname. It's been in place for 60 years. And the governor, according to his budget, we looked at it, it was like, oh my God, he wants to eliminate it. So it's money. Ithaca College gets probably $500,000. We get more than that. It's for every degree grant. It's been around forever, and it goes to the privates. So in quizzing the governor's staff, his staff said, oh, you guys have gotten direct federal aid, okay, per student. You will likely get more. We're going to just turn this program off for 2 years. It'll come back. Our intention is to have it come back when the federal money stops coming directly to you. Okay, so that was like they were being clear what their intention was. And that actually sort of like, honestly, I appreciated the openness instead of, like you said, hey, let's supplant this money and cut them on the back end. And so we'll see what happens with that budget item. But, I think there are times when the federal government, makes it clear, directs this shall not, again.
Right, it's like shall versus may is
other funds. And I think you guys do that when you're able. You're not able to always do that, but when they can do it, they do it. And then it's our job, frankly, at the state level, to keep our eye on funding levels and to make sure they don't play that game of, oh, you got that, I'm taking my money away. So again, and we keep them honest in the budget process by seeing what the appropriations are and what levels they're going to be, and the federal money. That's sort of, frankly, like our job to make sure that they don't play that game.
Those are the maintenance of effort provisions that Tom Reed was always talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to actually track it. And in many ways, it's not as direct. Like you're saying, Charlie, here's this specific pot of money. The feds came in and filled the pot. So whereas it's very different. We have spending come to us in so many different pots. It's less clear. Thank you for that, Charlie. That's a great example. Kate.
Sure, I'm backing up a little bit because my virtual hand was up for a while. So Amanda, the 34 billion that you said would come to New York State includes, I just want to make sure I have this right, the 23 billion that goes in direct aid to the state, 10 billion for K-12, approximately 13 billion in direct state aid. And then there's another approximately 11 billion that's for transit and childcare that's administered through New York State. and that gets us to the approximately 34 billion. I'm just like confirming that I have my numbers right.
The
Okay.
34-ish
Ish,
billion.
yes. No, I have it all ish. I've got, you know,
Yep,
haircuts written in my notes. I have all this stuff.
And it's
Just want to
not,
make sure
you
that
know,
I've got my basic accounting,
Yes.
accounting correct.
and that's not
And
an
then the-
exhaustive number, but yes,
Right.
it's direct aid, K through 12, higher ed, some transit money, some childcare money.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. So some of that transit and the transit and childcare money would come down to the local level, to local transit systems and childcare.
Presumably,
Presumably.
I think a lot of the transit money, obviously there's talk about for airports and for other
Mhm.
things like that. The formulas, the how much, I wouldn't even want to begin to speak to yet, but, and a lot of the transit money is going to be for bigger commuter systems, obviously.
Right. Right.
But
It's not all going to be for TCAT, you mean, right?
it is not, but it is all for New York, which is important.
That is
Okay.
important. Okay, and then the 10.6 billion for localities includes the money that you outlined as a starting point to look at for Tompkins County, plus additional money for the other 15 municipalities in Tompkins County.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so it wasn't really a question. I just had to run through my notes and make sure I had it down. So I'll take my hand down.
Perhaps,
and write
perhaps
down.
by the time I hang up, they may have done some stuff in the house and these numbers are, some of this is different, but
Yep, but it's a
it is
good,
what it is these days.
yeah, thank you so much.
All right, that's great. And I'm looking at the NACO website. And it says here, the US where they outline all of every county in the country.
Yes, they publicized the amounts, yep.
Right. And there's a paragraph here that says, Treasury would oversee and administer these payments to state and local governments, and every county would receive a direct allocation from Treasury. Once an eligible entity provides a certification on the use or needs of funds to the US Treasury, the agency is required to make the payment within 60 days. So what's a certification on the use or needs of the fund?
I don't have specificity on that yet. If you look at some of the language, it basically goes as far as to say, and I could try to pull it up. It would take, given the number of emails that I've had in the last 2 days, but basically that, I want to see if I get the wording right. They talk about it can be revenue replacement for loss associated with pandemic. So it's a pretty broad space with which your utilization and your need for those funds are, meaning that you're going to have a lot of flexibility with how you use them. I'm sure that's what they're referencing, but I don't want to get into the nitty gritty and misquote and mislead you down a road exactly as to the verbiage on that NACO has. But it's not intended to be, and nothing I have seen thus far or has been relayed to me implies that it is highly restrictive in terms of how you're going to procure these funds and how you can use them.
Right, but if we have to show that we've lost $20 million worth of,
I don't know that that's exactly accurate, that that's exactly what that means. I don't want to mislead you at this point. So let's just put a pause on that and I will try to figure out exactly what they're saying there, but I don't think that that's exactly the case.
okay, because I don't think we could cobble together $20 million worth of lost revenue or expenses at this point. I didn't really say that.
And that changes things, because that means that $19 million is up to $19 million, not $19 million.
Yeah, and
I could jump in and just this. Don't forget, this is 2 years, right? At least this, at the state level, So it's
okay.
state is going to use 2 fiscal years. So you can look across 2 state years of what you've lost in state aid, and then obviously, your impact on taxes. But then also, I'm sure there's also a prospective element to this. Look at these costs that we will be incurring based on these numbers that we're seeing. And this is just a requirement in other areas too, where they make you document it. I'll just mention this with the they called it Save Our Stages. Chuck, Senator Schumer was the champion of that, and I'm on the board of the Ithaca Opera Company, and we're applying for money. They make you document that first you've been in business, that you didn't just set up a business to claim this money. You were in business. You had losses in revenue, and then other requirements to get up to a certain amount. and again, they give you the opportunity to sort of put together an argument. It's not direct losses up to that point. It's also prospective costs that you will be incurring, or you should, or again, as a county, you will be incurring these needs, and they just want people to be able to document that you have a need for this money instead of just, here you go.
Okay, I put that.
I think I hear you. I think we should just put a pause in that, not get too ahead of our skis here. I'll see if I can suss out. I'm gonna go. I don't want to take time away from us talking to be reading a website. Let me look at exactly what they say. I'll have our folks look at it, and I'll tell you if I can clarify any of that. But I wouldn't get too alarmed, and I wouldn't get too over your skis right now on that.
All right, I put the website in the chat, and now I'm copying that paragraph, so you have that too. So thank you very, very much for checking that.
Yep.
Well, I just wanted to change topics for a second and stop asking you for money or thanking you for money.
That's okay. That's most of my day. So.
And instead convey how proud I am to have watched the incredibly well constructed and presented case that the House impeachment managers presented. So if you could convey that to Senator Schumer and his counterparts on the House side,
I will.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
It's been, I'm not an overly emotional person, and it was incredibly awful to see January 6th, in part because people who are family to me were in that building. And, our detail that also have become like family. I didn't know if they were alive, and when I watched, I thought I had sort of not moved past it, but I had, let's get going. And when I watched the last couple of days, it took me back, and it took me back in an almost incomprehensible way, as if what I had seen wasn't bad enough. And I think they did an excellent job if you were willing to listen to it. Now,
Yeah.
many of the jurors couldn't deign themselves to sit there and pay attention, but pretty bad. And I'll tell you, when I saw the video of my boss being dragged by his neck by my dear friend, Mike, Officer Lazinski, it was hard to watch.
Thank you for bringing.
Yeah, sorry, but yes, I will.
Yeah.
I will indeed pass it along.
Yeah, I've got goosebumps all over again. I mean, I think they framed it, very perfectly. I mean, I feel like they laid out the issues in ways that are, as you said, if anybody's willing to listen, are really impossible to dispute. So it's for the record, and people kept saying to me, oh, but they'll never convict. I said, this is for the record, and it's for the public. So,
And for history.
yeah.
Yes.
And we are, it's really important. And I think it will be a bipartisan vote. It will be more than a majority vote. So I think that's also important. Now but I also am so proud that Senator Schumer has kept the focus on moving ahead with the rest of government and with the nomination processes and confirmations, as well as the rescue plan. It's really been a wonderful exhibition of governance at its best, and respectful bipartisanship. And bipartisanship doesn't necessarily mean you agree with everything. It means that you understand that the other side are human beings and have a legitimate reason to be there. And that's, I think, how we operate. Mike Sigler may disagree with some of the things that we've said, but I think we can agree that we treat each other with respect and affection, and we all have the perfect right to be here. And I think that the leader is showing how to do that. And we're so grateful and proud. Amanda told me the other day that she got her package, and she will make sure.
I am, unless he changes his schedule, I'm going to give it to him on Monday.
Wonderful. Good. Thank you so much. Any other news? Any other questions? So, it's, Amanda, have you thought about heat pumps for your house instead of
A funny story is my house is, see, I've been married 15. My husband built the house right before we got married. So I don't know. I should know how long I was married. I keep forgetting. It's not quite 2 decades. We knew our furnace was going to go. So we actually intended to do a geothermal system. We, however, own a restaurant. And so the last year has not been good at all, although, we're still standing. So we are not doing a geothermal system right now, but it is our intention. We're doing patchwork on trying to, drag along our antiquated system so that at some point we can do that.
I did geothermal 2 years ago, and it's great. Federal and state tax incentives.
I for a whole host of reasons, I think it would and will be tremendous. It's just the upfront outlay.
That's right.
Long term, look, I don't believe you can put a price even on protection of leaving the earth viable for my grandchildren. So that in itself is an argument to do it, but it's not flush with cash at the moment. So hopefully this year will be a little better, and then we'll do it. And I won't be wearing hats in my house and winter coats.
I would be wearing gloves. Speaking of the environmental issues, I understand Leader Schumer is interested. Can you tell us a little bit about the cars, the clean vehicle bill he's interested in?
I cannot speak to being a jack of all trades, a master of nothing, but I can give you the top line for sure. So this was something we talked about last Congress, and we had out there as a proposal. And it essentially is to move us as a nation to utilizing electric vehicles in a pretty swift and rapid target date. The year of that is eluding me at the moment. I don't think it aligns exactly with GM's news that they want to be away from combustibles by 2035, but it's pretty close. And so through a process of incentivizing, the purchase of electrical vehicles, and there are, one of the points that a lot of folks say is they're costly. And it is potentially skewed to be workable for certain socioeconomic levels, which only continues to exacerbate the divide that we have across races and geographies. So there are some additional subsidies. That's what I want to try to target lower socioeconomic groups so that they too can contribute and we can all collectively move forward. We are targeting to kind of push that forward pretty quick here. I don't have an exact date on it, but there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I think GM's decision has really sort of given us even more of a leg up and attraction to try to move that.
Now, would that have to have 60 votes if it were to pass?
Well, so you can only use reconciliation a handful of times in a year.
Right.
And so reconciliation, it's the bird rule, obviously limits sort of the scope of which that can be deployed. It has to be, I'm going to say fiscally oriented. You could argue that this might be. I don't know that this would or would not be utilized in that way, but obviously you want to keep that powder in reserve for the biggies. And, we do have a whole budget that we have to do this year too. So I don't know that this would necessarily be as a standalone something that we could do that with. Could it be folded into something? I think that remains to be seen. I think, as my boss likes to say, everything is on the table in terms of how we move things forward.
Deborah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I assume that the senator understands that we also need the infrastructure to support that transition. And another issue that's arisen in New York that he may not be aware of is that a lot of the companies that manufacture these electric cars sell through retail outlets that aren't traditionally considered car dealerships. And there's a law in New York State that severely limits the number of those that can operate within the state, which makes it really difficult to get people they can't test drive the car. If they buy it, they can't take it to someplace to get it maintained and fixed. So that's going to be a real obstacle, at least in New York State.
Nice.
I know that within the proposal, an acknowledgement of the infrastructure to also support. So it's not just incentivizing the acquisition, but it's also recognizing that we need the infrastructure to support the deployment utilization of what we're incentivizing you to buy. What I will do, if it was of interest, is I can send it either Martha to you and you want to disseminate to the group the proposal that we have, which kind of speaks to a lot of those. And that way, if there's isolated questions that I haven't spoken to or I haven't thought to, we can certainly follow up on those and as a case by case basis or a broader discussion.
That'd be great. And
I'm just going to make myself a note while we're talking to do that.
yeah, NISAC has a resolution that went through about, I think they did, right? They went through about that issue.
No, they won't take it up until we pass it.
Oh, we have to pass it first. That's right.
So we'll be doing that
Let's pass it.
next few months.
Amanda, do you know whether it would be a cash for clunkers thing where you actually trade in and destroy the old car?
I have to go back and look. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
honestly don't know how we structured the incentive. If it's like a rebate, it might be. But let me go back and look. I've got to be, I probably was a little more versed on this a couple months ago before my brain got imploded with everything else that's been happening. So rather than misspeak, I need to refresh.
The
Can
retail
imagine.
outlet issue, very important that Deborah mentioned. Joe Morelli, when he was in the assembly, that was his bill. He's very good on that. And then Pat Fahey, she's an area, Albany area, someone she also on top. So people, they know the issue. Of course, some of the car dealers, are opposed, but it's a serious issue. People really know what's at stake. So it's important, but they're working on it.
Thank you, Charlie. That's great. That's good to know. All right. Anything else on, I can't believe we're sitting here. We actually have a few extra minutes with Amanda. Are we?
I know I don't have my staff meeting hasn't even come close to getting ready to start. So
We probably owe her some free time though, Martha.
okay. I'm just looking on the TV because they're showing, so I can. No, we're good. They're showing like what's going on right outside the leadership suite. So that's how I know when my staff meeting will start based on where people move. So we're still okay.
Okay. I think we really do appreciate the Save Our Stages measure in the last bill. That was really brilliant.
And the restaurants money is huge in this one too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot like we haven't even gotten to. Let me just, 1 second. I just want to finish the note that I need to send you the clean cars thing because I promise you it won't stay in my brain if I don't.
All right. And while you're doing that, Mike Hall, if you're there and if you have any airport questions.
Well, I think
Mike? Okay. You're on mute, Mike. You're still muted, Mike.
I'm going to hop off. I've got to hop off. But
Okay.
great. Thank you, Amanda, a ton. And
pleasure.
everybody
We'll
else
talk.
for just being so on top of this stuff.
All
Boy,
right.
very helpful. Great.
Great,
Thanks.
Charlie. We'll talk to you soon.
You betcha. Great.
Thanks,
All
Charlie.
right. Thanks a million.
no, all I want to do is thank our senators and representatives for continuing support of the transportation system. Our slogan at the airport is "We're ready when you are," and the reason we're ready when you are is because the federal government has leaned forward and made sure that the air transportation system remains viable and whole, and that's very important. We haven't had to argue for that. Because it's a big national issue, and I'm pleased that the discussions around other issues like support that we would get for for local government from the federal. But the air side of this has been very good, and there's potential for even more support forthcoming. But the good news for us is we still have 3 stations open. United Airlines is resuming service sometime between April and June, and they've notified the station. It's not just something that's posted on their website. American's doubling flights in April, so is Delta. So we're going to move from 30% year over year to probably 50 or 60% by early summer, and that's going to be very important for economic recovery, support for Cornell University, and other enterprises in our region that have a need to travel globally. So we're in good shape, and please, if you find the right opportunity, Amanda, let the senator know how much we appreciate his support for this system.
I certainly will.
Jason, are you there now? Thanks, Mike. Are you there? If you have, we have a couple minutes with Amanda, if you wanted to jump on and have anything to ask or say, or.
Amanda,
Hi, Jason. I have,
looks like we're having the same problem in our house. That's why I'm wearing a sweatshirt.
oh, good.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
It's like, I got
As
like
always-
hand movers. That's
As always, thanks for your support. I always appreciate all you do for us, and you're always responsive when we reach out. So thank you. I don't have anything to add, but you guys captured it all.
I have something that you'll be interested in on the family medical leave stuff.
Okay.
So I know when we talked about, I guess that was back before the holidays in December.
Yes.
Whether or not that was provision would be continued sunsetted or what would happen. And ultimately what happened is it was retained, but it was retained as a, not a mandate, as an incentive. It was a tax, a credit that could happen for employers that offered it. So that sunsets the 15th of March, I think.
Mhm.
I think that's right. What is currently in the text. So the mandate was not retained, and a lot of folks questioned and asked why that is not the case. And so part of the reason is because as a mandate, it doesn't fall under the narrow prescription that the BIRD reconciliation requirements have. Whereas if it's a tax credit, that's deemed to have a fiscal impact, and so it falls under the tent of reconciliation. It has been expanded for a couple of things, which I think will be of good use to you all, is that one, any employee that had utilized the allocation, I think it's 10 days, I could be wrong, that replenishes itself. So they get another crack. Local governments have been included as being eligible for these credits.
Great.
So you may choose to do the right thing and offer that for your employees, but you're obviously bearing a fiscal brunt of that. If this bears out, you will actually be able to receive a 100% full reimbursement for the cost of that for you.
That's great. That's great news. And we have continued it, and we would have continued it, and we'll probably continue it well beyond that March 15th deadline anyways, because it's an important piece of for our workforce. So thank you for that. We appreciate that.
And hopefully it'll all hold, but that's a good first step.
Oh, that's great news. Thank you.
It was not a very, very broadly loved or embraced component last Congress, but we got a little bit of different makeup here, so we're in a little better place.
Understood.
That's great. That's really good news. Terrific.
Pandemic unemployment, I don't know if anybody's interested in that. That right now is $400 a week, so it's up 100 from where it is right now. The current, I think it's the end of March that it sunsets, what was done in the December bill. There's so many middle of Marches or end of Marches, I sometimes struggle, but somewhere in March it sunsets. Actually, I think it's the middle of March, which is one of those cliffs that we're up against to try to get this stuff done. That extends in the budget resolution and extended it into September, which would make sense because that aligns with the fiscal year. Were to happen. The House language actually has it sunsetting in August, which is not what we love. We'd like to see it go through to September. I don't have an answer as to why that is, but we will obviously closely watch that as it keeps moving and hope to see it be restored to go to the end of September.
Right.
But obviously that's critically important for a whole host of reasons. When we had the initial pandemic unemployment, it attributed lifting so many millions of people out of poverty by having access to those funds. And, if you're a business owner, it put disposable income in people's pockets to kind of help, patronize and circulate wealth around, and certainly kept a lot of people somewhat solvent and in their homes. And it's just something that we're watching like a hawk.
Sure.
So there's that. The stimulus checks, as we call them, that's right now pegged at $1,400 a person, including children. The Biden proposal did not have a, there was it was phased so that if you exceeded this, I think it was $75,000 per person, $150,000 per couple, it started to phase out to a certain point. There was discussion about dropping the eligibility numbers, how to deal with the phase out. Right now, where they're hovering is just pretty much analogous to what we've had all along. So if you make up to $75,000, you would see the full as an individual. And if you make 150 as a couple, you would see the full there is a phase out with a hard kind of dropout at 100,000 per person, 200,000 a couple. So if you as a partnership are making $200,000 a year, you won't see a check. And the dependents are included. The nice point so far in the legislation, the language that's out of the House, is the dependent category is extended beyond just children. So for families who have developmentally disabled children, or young adults who are caring for them as dependents, they are counted as part of that $1,400 just as a child would. So there's that, which is good.
What about, do you need a social security or an EIN number to get a check?
So the current iteration, if I get this right, when we had the Votorama, there was all kinds of amendments and things like that that were put forward and voted on, and then late at night or early in the morning, depending how you want to look at it, Senator Schumer dropped some language that sort of said, yeah, some of those things you passed, nope, mulligan. And one of them was they were trying to modify that. I think currently the way the budget resolution stands is that if you are, I want to make sure I get this right, if in a partnership with someone who is not a citizen, you as the citizen are not precluded from getting your checks. If you recall in the first rounds, if you had a partnership with someone, regardless of their status, so, legal or illegal, but not also a citizen, you were not able to receive those checks. Those individuals will, as will their dependent children. I don't think there's any further modification to that yet, but obviously we want, again, all of this assistance to be as robust and helpful, not limiting as possible. So, we'll continue to watch it.
So the non-citizen wouldn't get the check, but the partner could get the check, whereas previously not.
That's how it was in December. And I think that is what has been retained. I will make a note to triple check on that one.
Okay.
And then there's lots of, more small business help. You mentioned the Save Our Stages has more money infused into that. There is a $25 billion pot for the restaurant and hospitality industry, which is basically grants based on need, not loans. So it, more or less, you've seen folks talk about the Restaurant Act. It more or less is the Restaurant Act that's included. That's something that we, pushed quite hard for. There's increases for idle grants, for idle loans, and the restoration of the $10,000 grant that was part of the idle loans. The PPP program has been expanded to include more nonprofits. 501c6s was last time. I'm trying to remember which it will help and support unions and the like, as well as digital and print media, which the small news sources are drying before our eyes, and many say that may be attributable to part of the lacks of fact information that we are able to receive. So there are support for them as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that.
How about broadband? And let me just raise an issue. You're probably aware of this. We are sort of fighting with the perception, and Governor Cuomo stated that 98% of all localities or all addresses in New York have access to the web. Our understanding is that that's only because the FCC's maps define this as if you've got one house in a census block, then therefore that census block is covered, even though, the one house may be completely an aberration and everybody else is not covered and it's inaccessible and unaffordable. So do you know, there's the census block definition is completely inadequate.
I have heard from many communities concerns about that, including, the options that are tabulated or deemed as having access to internet or things like that, satellite stuff, which is like $1 bazillion and is not cost effective or really helpful. We have said all along for many, many years, but I think that this pandemic has just blown the lid off the argument that access to broadband and Wi-Fi is a luxury, so that you or your kids can live stream games. it is as critical an artery as water and sewer. I mean, we're all working and staying safe because we have broadband. So, it is something that is critically important. I know there is some discussion in pots of money. I don't know exact, I'm not read up yet, and I don't think it's all been marked up yet on what is going to come out of this particular piece of legislation to sort of expand that. I think what you're talking about with the maps is an issue, probably separate and distinct, although obviously exacerbated by COVID. I don't have quite an answer for it, but our goal is to make sure that we have the resources available and make it a priority and look at it as quite frankly, true infrastructure to make these investments in last miles in communities that have no service or inadequate service, because we just, you have school districts that there are kids who cannot learn at home because they don't have internet.
Right. Kids going to parking lots.
And I would argue, as my boss has said, that only exacerbates the socioeconomic divide, because it's the have and the have-nots, and the have-nots are usually the ones that, are not lifted up and fall further and further behind.
Okay, so that pointing out.
Yep, I get that. I've heard it. I don't have a specific answer on how to deal with it. I mean, the short term, the answer is just to have the investments, we expand what exists. The map thing is something that we are aware of. I don't have a remedy to share with you. And I do know that there are some monies for broad infrastructure kind of stuff with broadband. I don't know how much that remedies that in this go around. But it's certainly on our list.
Okay. And while we have you, can I ask another question that's been bothering me for years?
We got 5 minutes.
You know that the Medicaid federal Medicaid allocation is different for each state. And my understanding is that the formula for how much each state gets, what's the federal percentage, is based on the average income level of the residents. The difference between average or mean and median really distorts the question of income inequality. If you've got, when you've got, outliers like New York State has some of the, the wealthiest Americans, when you use the average, that distorts the number you end up with. If you use median, it's a much more accurate measure of poverty in the state. My understanding is because the Medicaid formula is based on mean, New York State is seriously disadvantaged compared to if median were the measure that were used. Have you ever heard of anything about that? And is there a way to add like those two little letters? If you put D and I in the middle of the word mean, you get median.
I am aware of the formula that helps with the computations. I don't have an answer to how or why. I get what you're saying. I don't have an immediate answer of what the remedy or what the receptivity for the remedy fix is, but it is duly noted, and I will certainly add it to my list of discussion points of how we can make the world a more equitable and better functioning space. So just a little feedback quick before I go on the NACO stuff. I did shoot a quick text over to my colleague who's been doing a lot of the state and local nitty gritty. And so the concern that you raise about that language is, I confirm, is the first that anybody has sort of advanced it. His first blush is that what would be deemed the negative economic effects language that's in the legislation is really, really broad enough for all kinds of uses. So at first blush, he's not really anticipatory that you will have a problem meeting that threshold, because that's kind of what I was saying. But we'll do a little bit more deep dive. So I think hang in there, don't get too upset or too over our skis is probably good advice. I didn't just pull it out of anywhere. So
okay,
but we'll do more of an assessment on that. But I think it's pretty broad and generous at this point.
Okay, and is tourism money, then tourism revenue included in that as revenue loss?
I don't know specifically that it's named, but I think that that's probably part of the big all-encompassing negative effects language and things that fall under that umbrella. This was
Okay.
not intended to be onerous or a high hurdle to whatever the phrase is to jump through. Our goal is to get you the resources you need, not.
Sure, but just generally that'll make the stakes broader. That encompasses, if you do include tourism revenue, that covers all sorts of states that don't have any kind of local sales tax, and they depend on tourism money instead of.
Right. I mean, I think without putting words into the legislators' mouths here, the goal was not to make this unattainable. The goal was to make it right there for everyone to sort of move forward. So
Okay.
I don't think that it's scripted to exclude. It's scripted to allocate.
Okay. Music to our ears. Thank you again so much, Amanda.
Of course. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everything that everybody's doing, and stay safe and warm and all those good things. And if you have questions, I know I owe you the clean car. I think that was the biggest, right? The clean car was the biggest follow-up that I have to do right now. But if there are other questions, I'm happy to try to answer them as best as I can. And,
Okay.
just bear in mind that this is our first preview of what we see, and we've got a process, but our goal is to be thorough and good and swift.
Thank you so very much.
All right.
We watch every day in the news, and we deeply appreciate everything that you're doing. And our
I
best.
will send the boss your best. Thank you very much. Everyone take care. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Good luck with the furnace.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Amanda. Bye-bye. Okay, hope everybody didn't mind that kind of went over. I sort of feel like you get 15 extra minutes with Amanda. You want to just kind of soak it up and use what you got. So we can take it out of the chair's report and everything else. Hi, Jason. Your furnace is no good either?
No, my furnace is fine. I'm just wearing a sweatshirt. My boiler is working just fine.
Good. Okay, good.
Right?
All right.
right.
So Jason, you sent us some material yesterday.
Sure.
And sort of your digestion of issues at the state level.
Right. I can go through it real quick. Unfortunately, I have to go at 11:55 for another meeting, but I'll kind of shoot through this. Can everybody see the screen I'm sharing?
Yeah, and sorry about the time. I
Yeah.
trust you understand.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So I put together some information that I think is probably relevant with it right now. Obviously, the budget is very large and there's a lot of different components to it, but I tried to piece out some pieces that are probably worth talking to the state legislators about. I'll sift through this. The attachments that I sent were more just some backup, most of which, didn't have a whole lot of substance, but it just kind of gave some backup to things. So sales tax diversion are two pieces of the puzzle that I think we're getting hit particularly hard on. The distress hospital fund, this is the fund that they adopted in last year's budget, but it was only expected, the payments to it were deferred till January of this year, which happened. 331,000 was deferred from our sales tax payment in January or February to be shifted over into this fund of which no one really knows quite how it's set up or how to access the funding yet. But over the next May, August, November, and then January of 22 are the next quarterly payments into that fund. It's based off of the prior year sales tax. So if there's any saving grace in this, and that the 2020 sales tax was particularly low for us. So it'll actually be a little bit less than was really estimated. Nonetheless, I would have rather paid a little bit more than this and had more of the sales tax back, but it sunsets in 22. I suspect this will be in play for negotiations for the 22-23 budget because it's only a 2-year sunset clause. I don't know how this is going to pan out. I don't know what this fund is used for per se, but it's about $250 million. So about 200 of it, I think, is coming from downstate, from the city, and 50 of it is coming from upstate counties. Point being is it diverts sales tax, our sales tax, away from us to fund a state, an unfunded state mandate. AMAID, AMAID is diverted last year for the first time out of our county sales tax. It was $387,000. It was all the towns and villages in Tompkins County. The city was not part of that. Believe it or not, because the governor's cutting AMAID by 20%, we actually would have less diverted this year. It would be $309,000. So we make about 70 grand or so off of this. that we didn't want to give up to begin with nonetheless. So it's less diversion because of that reduction. The city is getting hit particularly hard. They're losing about $500,000 off of this AIM reduction. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with us. So these are two issues. If you look at it, I mean, it's over $600,000 it's being diverted out of our sales tax that wasn't being diverted 2 years ago.
Jason, roughly that's a 1.5 on our tax levy, probably.
Yeah, about that. More than 1%. Yeah, more than 1%, probably closer to 1.5%. Jail staffing. So the governor in his budget identifies that he's going to provide some relief and staffing flexibility. As you know, the Commission of Corrections set staff. We've experienced, as a lot of jails have experienced, decrease in jails, but we've not been able to minimize the staffing, or I'm sorry, decrease the minimum staffing requirements that are set by the state. It's expected that this will be done regulatorily, but there's been nothing proposed yet. And I followed up with NISAC, and they confirmed that nothing has been put out in terms of draft regulations to look at. But this could be good for us if we have the ability to set our staffing locally versus having to rely on Commission of Corrections. SJSTP and COPS funding, these are both funding sources that we get. They're separate sources now. They're for preventative services, preventative detention services, and preventative for foster care placement services. The proposed budget is proposing that they be combined. In total, it's about $1 million to about 16 million, and with a 20% reduction. So we rely pretty heavily. I mean, we use COPS funding quite a bit for some of our preventative services. We're one of maybe a dozen counties in the state that gets this funding. We're kind of middle of the road in terms of how much we get. These are programs that are pretty well established that if the funding were to go away, you probably would be picking up the total local share. You'd probably be picking up the lost revenue locally because you wouldn't want to disassemble or discontinue these programs. I mean, we have some data, and we'll probably get into it a little bit more, that, you know, what this helps in terms of preventative services. So, you know, individuals aren't going to get, you know, youth aren't going to get wrapped up into the criminal justice system or other issues, whether it's detention or foster care placement. So I think this is an important one that we want to ensure stays accessible and funded because it's these two programs are something that we take advantage of.
And it looks like in the governor's budget, the cut is 48,000 as proposed.
That's our impact on us, yes.
On us, yeah. Okay.
Community colleges. So I did reach out and I sent you kind of the summary from SUNY just so you had a broader understanding of it. Two highlights, and I spoke to Deb Molinoff about this and Dr. O just a little bit just to get their take on it. These are two big ones that they want to see supported, is the streamlining of new education approval. So the state, you know, this basically allows them to set some curriculum without having to get approval from the state, which they feel is important in order to change their programming effectively and promptly, which I think they're looking to do in terms of shifting their focus from a business plan perspective. So it was important to know that. Also, there is money in there for capital investments for campuses, which is something they support. They weren't particularly, I mean, they continue to support and argue for the restoration of the funding floor and kind of the recalculation of the funding rate from FTEs to headcount or some other calculation. They seem to think, though, that that's probably not in play this year, but more in play next year. But it's still something that they want to continue to support that change.
Jason, the way you've written that, isn't that actually a headcount is essentially the same as FTE?
I'm just taking their language on it so I can get some clarity on it.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
it's different.
It is different.
If you have part-time students,
Yes.
they don't count as a student. You can mush them together to get a full-time equivalent, basically, full-time enrollment.
so you're saying headcount would,
One person, regardless of whether they're full-time or part-time status, would count as one, where now part-time, they're being wrapped into an FTE.
okay, all right.
Oh, I
thank
mean, when
you.
it comes down to it, overhead and the ability to instruct is the same regardless of, you know, whether you have a full-time or part-time student.
All right.
Civil service reform. So the NISAC resolution that NISAC is putting forward for civil service reform is Definitely something we would support. Also, as we're going through the reimagining public safety, there'll be some other proposals in the next week or two that'll come out reforming or really abolishing Section 75, the civil service law, and amendment to the general municipal law 207C. 207C is the disability law. These are highly flawed in terms of their inability for employers to be able to manage effectively discipline procedures and basically manage workforces. And, for example, you've got situations now where it takes, somewhere upward of a year to be able to manage a discipline case, which is just a challenge. So there's some significant changes we'll be proposing with that, with the reimagining public safety initiative.
Okay, just a second. Mike, I see you in it. Jason, does the NISAC resolution cover it as you support what's in the NISAC resolution?
We support what covers what's in the NISAC resolution. This will be above and beyond the NISAC resolution, Section 75 and GML 207C changes.
I see. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I just thought I'd put it in there just so there's more civil service law changes that go with that.
Okay, and that's stuff we're going to propose locally, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I would expect there'll probably be a resolution of support or several of them coming out of the Reimagining Public Safety Initiative.
Okay, Mike Sigler.
I can just wait till he's done and then I'll ask whatever.
Okay. Go ahead.
And the last is just the FMAP reconciliation. FMAP reconciliation, as you know, we haven't had this reconciliation done in 4. We're going on 5 years. I did submit a FOILS request to the DOH and DOB. I've got a response acknowledging the request and that they'll get back to me in 20 days. So that was good. But this is a piece that I don't think we should lose because I suspect next year will be a Medicaid reform initiative by the governor. And I don't want this to get lost in that process. We're probably owed a decent amount of money at this point, going 5 years without reconciliation. The DOH has said that they reconcile every year and they give that information to the DOB, but yet no one knows how much it is or what's the reconciliation. I would imagine if we owed them money, we would already have heard, which isn't the case. I can only assume they owe us money. So we talked to NISAC and they like the idea. They're like, that's a great idea. Why don't we file a full request?
I think it's brilliant.
It's not really, but it's, it's just like, we just sent it out yesterday. I'll send you a copy of the letters and we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, you sent us, you included that attachment. Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah. So
yeah, this was discussed at the NISAC Resolutions Committee.
It's kind of funny, but that's kind of a ballpark of just some things that I think are highlight that are probably worth pushing and continuing as we talk to our state legislators. Like I said, there wasn't a lot around Medicaid this year, which I suspect it'll be back this year or next year. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe just so much uncertainty in the whole budget. Sigler, and at some point I want to ask you about raise the age as another.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I got 3 questions. First off, the FOIL thing is very clever. So I like that a lot. Are we talking a lot of money there? I mean, that potentially.
I think you're talking anywhere between $100,000 to $300,000 a year.
So like $300,000, $400,000.
It's a good amount.
5.
It's real money. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I like that it's clever and all. I find that hard to believe. They're basically hiding the money from you.
Yes, I mean, just to kind of give you a little background, Mike, if you remember this last go around with the CARES Act, there was, Senator Schumer was pretty big in ensuring that the enhanced FMAP funding that was extended was critical in putting language, which the governor was pretty upset about, that it ensured it would go to counties. And that was primarily, I think, because of what the governor's doing with the EFMAP funding and reconciliation. I mean, his action of not reconciling this with us caused that insert into the CARES Act language, which the governor was not happy about.
No, okay, yeah, I find that kind of remarkable. But you mentioned back, and I'm just confused about this, capital investment colleges. Mm-hmm. When I think capital investment, I'm thinking buildings and stuff like that, but I wouldn't think that would make sense in that context. I mean, what do you mean by capital investment?
So there's about $500 million for capital improvements, and a lot of this has to do with routine maintenance and capital improvements that colleges and hospitals can tap into. and the community colleges want to see that funding, continue in that proposed budget, so they have access to it.
But it really is for like buildings and things like that. I
Yes,
would think
I
that
believe
this time, I mean, I'm looking at Ithaca College cutting 100 people.
Yeah.
I would think that buildings would be kind of low on their priority list of what's important to them.
It was in the proposed budget, and what they're saying is they want to support that initiative.
Okay.
It sounds like it's there
Pursuing
every
the
year. I think there's a certain amount every year that's put in the state budget, and this is kind of the annual amount, and they want to continue to
Yeah.
support it.
Not for private colleges. This is
SUNYs.
like TC3's roof that they came to us and,
Yeah.
And I would think that even TC3, that the situation's similar, staffing. I don't know. It just seems like we're not really, when we did a poll of the county legislature, capital expenditures were pretty low on our priority list. I thought so. Anyway, the civil service reform you were talking about, last question. Are they expecting a lot of pushback from, if they are expecting pushback, who would that come from?
Well, the Civil Service Commission generally is antiquated in and of itself, so they just don't know how, and the unions will that it's a required mandatory subject of negotiation, which essentially allows for the continued delay of essentially adjudication of discipline. So on one hand, you have speedy trial, requirements from a defense and public defender's perspective, but yet when it comes to similar types of determinations with discipline procedures, they stretch on for months, if not years. And that's a byproduct of civil service section 75, and it's a byproduct of the collective bargaining process.
Okay, thanks, Mike. One issue what about raise the age and the beds? And I raised this at the NISAC Public Safety Committee meeting last week, and it really touched the nerve. Everybody's driving 17-year-olds across the state.
Yeah. So this is a state issue that does not have a state solution. We actually internally are going to have a meeting in the next 2 weeks or so with KIT to kind of understand what options we have available to us. And there's a variety of problems, and I also think it's going to be regional. So the state is closing 2 or 3 facilities. Some are secure detention, and there's 4 facilities they're closing, which are youth detention facilities. So I don't know what we're asking for yet until we understand the full problem. And I think it has to do with the state has multiple types of facilities, detention facilities, based on service needs with those individuals. And then there's age challenges that come in there. So we are going to try to understand what has been the most frequent issue we've had, so we know how to try to put solutions together with it. But the issue needs to be addressed. There's not enough juvenile or youth detention beds when it comes to that case. And there are situations that need it, and there are definitely situations that don't. This county particularly these judges, when they ask for someone to be put into a detention facility, it is a really bad situation, probably worse than most counties would. With the time the judge makes that determination, they've exhausted all non-detention options, more so than probably other counties that are much less lenient and don't push in-home options and preventative options as we do. So if we're saying it's a problem for us, it's definitely a problem for other folks. So we don't have the solution yet, but we know there's not enough bed options.
So my question is, shouldn't this be a priority in some lobbying efforts at the state?
It could be, but I don't know exactly what we're lobbying because we don't know exactly what the solution is yet. There are so many different types of beds that you need. We need to know what's the most common that we're accessing. Is it a specialized secure detention? Is it secure detention? Is it there's a whole bunch of other options, and I think the state is aware, and enough counties are saying, hey, we are getting stuck in situations where we have youth that are under the sheriff's responsibility. We can't place them. We can't drive to Long Island and place them because there's no beds available. They can't sit in an office, handcuffed to a cot for 24, 40 hours. That's the problem. We need to figure out what that solution is yet. So I think NISAC's aware of this. I don't know what they have in terms of potential lobbying solutions to it, but it's an issue that the state needs to not just turn away from.
Okay, I have asked for a special meeting of the Public Safety Committee at NISAC to
Yep.
deal with this. So we'll see. I hope that'll happen. You'll remember, I think it was the first year you were here, we did have a meeting or two with some second floor people at the on public safety. So that's kind of what I'm saying is if we
Yeah.
feel like, I'm not sure we have to suggest the solution. I think if we make evident the problem and how broad the problem is, it's kind of their job.
The state's
pass
fully
this
aware of the
along.
problem. The state's fully aware of the problem because they're getting these calls all across the state. And the response is, well, we're not going to mandate a bed open up. They're just not addressing the issue. So, it sounds like they don't know.
Okay. All right. Anything else for Jason? Henry, you can't talk so much today.
All right. It's good seeing everybody. Sorry to run.
Thank you.
But I'll do a better update on the state budget at Tuesday's meeting.
All right. Thanks so much. All right.
Yeah,
Have a
take
good
care.
weekend. All right. Thanks, Jason. All right, everybody. Thank you all. Let's see. So this leads us only 20 minutes late into, I did want to, I made sure you had the NISAC resolutions in your packet. There's a lot there. That's one source of like kind of issues of what should we try to lobby on. And that was kind of why I put that in there to see if, we had consensus on the things that are important to us that we want to try to push. We've mentioned that we're trying to find a time to meet with Peter Oberacker, our state senator from the eastern part of the county. We have usually set up meetings with all of our delegations, so we can try to do that. But first, we kind of want to know what we're interested in lobbying on. So that was the reason to put in the NISAC resolutions. Before I go to those, though, I want to highlight the NISAC lobby days, March 10th and 11th. I don't know if everybody here has gone to that website. It's a new thing. They've had lobby day. They had a lobby day last year. Feels like it, and a bunch of us went, but it feels like it was 20 years ago. So March 10th and 11th, you go and you sign up you look at the particular subject area that you're interested in, see if it fits into your calendar. They've got great positions, like 2-3 page position papers on each subject area. So I signed up for a few of them last night. So I hope I will send out a reminder to that effect to the legislature, I hope today. I also want to mention an opportunity that I hope folks will consider is membership on a NACO committee. And how this works is you fill out a form to apply, but your state association has to recommend you. Steve Aquario would be delighted to recommend any of us for any of the committees that that NACO has. And I've been going to a few of these. There's a Rural Action Caucus that I go to, and there's an Environment, Energy, and Land Use Committee that I'm on. So I've been going to a number of meetings this year, and I will tell you they often have really interesting speakers. They do a great job explaining federal issues. And I also really find it fascinating to be, as much as Zoom can be fascinating, on calls with people from, East Oshkosh, Michigan, and, Carver City, Texas, and Sonoma County, California, and they're all on these calls. And I just find it really interesting. So I know Henry and I both sent out some things from NACO. I would encourage folks to think about joining a NACO committee, and it's easy to ask Steve Aquario to put your name forward. So that's another opportunity. So if there are no questions about any of that, so I hope folks had a chance to look at the NISAC resolutions. I had a number of things that I highlighted. Deborah.
Yeah, Martha, these aren't I know that we made some changes, for example, substantial changes in that one resolution in the Planning and Energy Standing Committee. So the ones that we got in this packet are not the updated ones?
Right. The resolutions committee takes what all the committees pass. What you have is what went to the standing committees. On Wednesday, the resolution committee took, a member that took all the resolutions and they see what revisions there are and then they vote on it, vote on them up or down, basically. I've asked Ryan Gregoire for the updated packet and it might actually be in my inbox. He also might be holding it back until the board formally votes to accept the resolutions. As soon as I get that, I'll obviously send it. So these are the topics, the resolutions themselves, as Deborah said, many of them have gone through some edits. So if nobody's got any that stand out, I'll mention the ones that I find important. Just looking at this for table of contents, packet page 3. And Katrina, thank you very much for formatting them this way so they didn't take up too many trees. And I think it's readable for all of us with a bright light. Mike Lane, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I just immediately saw the broadband resolution, and I think that's an area we should be making our voices known.
Right, so I'm looking at, that's on page, the one that's called New York State Fiber Right-of-Way Fee, page 15.
Well, I was also looking at 17.
Yep, okay, I totally agree with both of those. And I think we might know somebody in the assembly who might care about that issue.
I don't know as I want to rescind the fiber right-of-way fee.
Actually, that one, I think Henry's been working on this. Heather McDaniel mentioned that, Henry, you're working on this with Kurt Anderson at IAED. You're on mute, Henry.
Yes, I am. We're working on some resolutions to come to HED on it. So yeah.
Do you know any more about it?
We're working on the one that deals with what you said, the amenda about the broadband, the 98% by the governor. We're also working on the PERM 75 tax. We're looking for a waiver from that to get them to waive that because it would be it would be too costly to do new projects with it. We're looking for a waiver.
Yeah, I talked to Heather about it a little bit. She said it would kill, for example, the project that's going to the Lansing Center. There'd
Right.
be thousands and thousands of dollars. It would kill those. I think it's 22,000 a mile.
Yes, it's 22,000 a mile.
So it would.
Yeah, that's
kill,
ridiculous.
It would kill rural broadband. She told me it was inserted in the governor's budget last year. So it was never voted on as a standalone by the legislature. And she believes the legislature is interested in repealing this. And that it was sort of not really meant. And I said, well, why would that have been put in? Was this sort of budget relief for DOT? She thought, yeah, that's just a way for DOT to get money from, out of internet companies.
Okay.
So does that make
Yeah,
sense?
we're only, like I said, we're only asking for a waiver from it. So I'm not sure whether we're not going for a repeal for a reason, but I got to talk to Kurt about it today, in fact.
Okay, the NISAC resolution asks for repeal of it, a recession. Yeah.
Recession.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm for that too.
Well, it's a huge problem in the North Country because so much of the Adirondack area is state roads, and that's where people live who have the least coverage and need it the most.
Michael, are you saying we
My
shouldn't?
feeling is that it's not unusual to have franchise fees for utilities, for example. And so maybe this is too large a fee, I don't know. But I don't think they should be able to use the right of way the same as telephone companies and electric companies and not have to pay a fair fee.
All right, well, I think
Martha?
resolution come to HED and take it under consideration. Deborah?
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe we could ask our Assemblywoman if she happens to know what the difference is between the fiber fee that the state is hitting the broadband providers with versus the right-of-way fees that other utilities are paying.
Mhm. Henry, when you talk to Kurt, maybe you could raise that.
Okay,
I mean, I think there is federal law that if somebody builds a house, the utility company has to provide electricity to the house.
Right.
And I don't know, I don't think you have to pay depending upon how far your house is from the road.
Yeah, you do.
You do? Okay, well, I think it might be a different thing. And, understanding that we're not, we only have one utility in our area. They have a monopoly, so they have certain responsibilities. We have competing internet providers, so it may be a kind of a whole different thing. But anyway, I guess we can certainly talk about it it'll come to HED. And
Can I just mention back when we were talking about the cable TV franchises and they took away the possibility of the county having a franchise with the cable company. One of the things we were looking at was a right-of-way fee on the county roads because the towns and villages get to the franchise fees, even though some of their roads are county roads where the franchise is using, and not town roads or not village streets. So that's something we looked at.
okay, well, we will do that. And thanks, Henry, for working on this. It's good.
sure.
The other one about broadband coverage, I do know that in the committee that the whereas about Cuomo saying that we have 98% coverage and that's based on faulty maps. We just took out that whereas about Cuomo claiming there was 98% coverage. The point really was about just supporting broadband. We were pleased that he's supporting it from the sense, his proposal about low-income people having a subsidy, but or a cap on low-income fees. But we didn't want to sort of, criticize him for using faulty maps because everybody does. So, anyway, that language did get changed a bit. And Deborah, you were in on that meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So was Annie.
Oh, good. Okay. Mike, is your hand still up or left up?
No,
Okay. The community college one, I certainly see, would want us to highlight that one. The FMAP Medicaid percentage reconciliation resolution, I think is obviously important. I think for lobbying that we do, in a sense, we don't really have to kind of push all of these that NISAC does, because then it's like we're not pushing anything. So kind of the trick is to really identify the things that matter to our community, especially. Deborah, there was the one about, remember the issue about foreclosure that you raised about the order of, I'm looking at, it's under Standing Committee on Taxation and Finance Resolutions. Did you have a look at that one?
That was an old one.
I know, it's still on there. About the order of who's liable. You know, the order in which you pay your taxes. Which one is that?
It's not on here now.
It was page 60, what they're calling page 60. All right, I'll look for it and highlight it for you. You had your hand raised for something else?
Yeah, I was wondering how we want to handle these resolutions as between Tiger and the program committees, because I think it's important to keep the program committees involved. I also think that if we can work cooperatively with the program committees, it will lead to a better integration of Tiger into the larger committee structure of the county. I guess that's something we ought to be talking about. I mean, do we start a resolution in Tiger, or do you reach out to the program committee chair and say, you know, we'd like you to take a look at this? I mean, who looks at it first? Because we don't necessarily have the technical wherewithal and the access to staff that would help us make intelligent choices.
Mm-hmm. What do folks think? That's a good point. Mike?
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with things going through two committees. If there's something that we're interested in, and it has, it's out of HEW or whatever, we should notify that we're taking this up, and would they consider taking it up as well? And vice versa. If they've got something, we need to be aware of it and ought to end up on our agenda to consider.
And in a way, it's sort of up to the calendar, like what's next.
Yeah.
I'll be doing the HED agenda next week, so I'll take a look at these and
Right. I think asking Leslin to maybe send out an email to committee chairs and say, hey, if you've got something that ought to be lobbied about, or, you know, we need to get it to Tiger as well.
I mean, I think passing a resolution is one piece of it, but as we're talking about setting up these meetings with their delegation and with anybody else, if we want to try to get meetings with anybody in Albany, I see it as our job to put together an agenda for a lobbying meeting. Let's say we have a half hour with not just let's say our delegation. Okay. We maybe have an hour. What is it we want to talk about? And in some cases, a resolution will have already gone through one of our committees. In some cases, it might not have gone through committee, but we still would put it on the agenda. So, tell you what, when I get the final resolutions from NISAC, and we might all get them. I'm going to guess that a blast email that we would all get. I'll make sure that Leslin really highlights that and asks committee members, you know, what you've suggested, Mike, that if there's anything specific that they want us to push. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think we need, as a committee, to pass a resolution on everything we lobby for. Yeah. Okay.
But there are definitely things that fall through the cracks that aren't really in any committee. So this is a good place to make sure we find those. Mike, were you going to say something?
I just wanted to add that, not on this topic, but on what we've been talking about, different things, is we've got to make sure that we're talking about community colleges all the time. And For example, when they were talking about changing from FTE to headcount, college, that could be a $500,000 hit to the college each year if they change that formula.
$500,000 hit if they go to headcount?
If they go to headcount.
No,
I thought it's a benefit.
no, I thought it was a benefit.
No, I didn't read it that way. Or, they were talking about it last night, unless I got it mixed up, because there was a meeting, sort of retreat on their budget last night, and that's what Bill Talbot was saying. I'll double check with him. If I'm wrong, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Of course, they could lower the subsidy per head count. You know, they could take the same amount of money and just spread it out. Of course, if we have a lot of part-time students who aren't getting aid at all right now.
We have all the co-curricular concurrent enrollment students. I don't know how they get counted. They get counted now as FTEs, but I don't know how they would be head count in college since they're not actually enrolled on campus.
Okay.
But did not Natalie Fronsky also ask us to support the community college initiative?
Bronowski? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You know, Jason's thing said there was a cut for daycare, so that would probably hurt the college as well.
In the program support for the, yeah, I saw that. If you would find out more about how this would work, that'd be great. And
yeah, I'll double check on that.
And preferably before we would, of course, it'll take a little time to set up meetings with the delegation. But that'd be great because it is, obviously don't want to do anything that's going to hurt TC3.
Right.
Deborah?
Does TC3 report to GO? Where does it fit?
For budget, it goes to budget, but for
Okay.
other things, it goes to a different committee. I forgot where it is.
Oh, so it's all carved up?
Yeah,
I wonder if it's to HED.
it may, maybe.
I'm going to look.
That would be the education.
Yeah. All right, I'm opening that folder. Budget capital personnel has TC3.
And it has its budget.
It's not at all under HED.
Maybe it's all there now.
Well, I suspect BCP has it because mostly all we pay attention to is the funding.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't.
We have capital projects and we have other things.
Yeah.
But we don't deal with our programs so much, but okay. Yeah, it'd be really, I mean, I was actually sorry that they didn't try to get, and I think that the NISAC resolution was revised to say they wanted to go back to the hold harmless, to the maintenance of effort funding. They had that in 2 years ago's budget where it was not 100%, but it was 98%. So the maximum dollar amount any college would see cut was 2%. And they got rid of that in the budget that we're in now. And I was sorry, I think that went back into the NISAC resolution. So we'll see on the final. I think that's a much stronger position.
Yep.
So, okay. Let me know if you got any other thoughts on any of these, and we'll be looking at the final language very soon. Any committee members' reports? All right. Can I get a motion on the January 6th minutes? Moved by Deborah, seconded by Mike Sigler. Any comments on Katrina's verbatim minutes? Really a great record, Katrina, of everything that's discussed. Thank you. All right, I'll take a vote then. Mike Lane?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So, anything else so that passes unanimously. Anything else for the good of the order?
Thanks to Kate for being here for our meeting.
Kate, do you have anything else you would like to share?
No. I probably could have left earlier, but it's just nice to listen in to you guys.
Okay.
Yes, I'm working on a few other things while I'm listening, but no, I was glad to be here today.
How's school going?
Cornell?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been on campus, but yeah, I think the new cases are dipping down.
Yeah.
They are.
The surge in cases have been dipping. So yeah, yes, it's
Okay.
going okay, but it's just, as everywhere with the emerging variants, it's a whole new ball game. I'm just here quarantined with my cat in a tiny COVID bubble. She turned my computer off partway through the meeting. Very helpful. Yeah. So, well, on that substantive note, I'll mute myself.
You have to teach her how to use the mute button. Did you?
Oh my gosh, she, I guess all cats love sitting on laptops,
Right.
but she did. I came back. I tried to put it to sleep before I leave, but I came back and there was like this draft email that she'd created that was really impressive. So anybody who's on my Instagram account can see that.
One of my cats once turned my whole screen upside down and time getting it back.
She was having trouble getting some recognizable addresses into the to field.
That's probably a good thing.
I know. She didn't send anything, so that's good.
Hey, did you say you're actually in quarantine, or is that just?
No. I just mean in my tiny
okay.
bubble. No, I'm not in quarantine. My son, however, who is taking a semester off from Cornell, who's a Cuba Heights firefighter, a bunch of them are in quarantine. And it seems very cautious to me because he was 3 weeks past, as an EMT, 3 weeks past his second vaccine. But one of the volunteers who'd been away over the break came back and got his first vaccine and then was COVID positive within a limited period of time. So now they're all locked down over there. But I'm just glad he's
Wow.
I said, I think it's going to be okay. Like you have 95% coverage.
Well, it's great that he's a firefighter.
It's been awesome for him. He joined when he was 16 and
Wow.
year living there, and this semester he's been trying for years to get into an advanced EMT class, but they're all often canceled. So he had signed up for one at Upstate and then it was canceled. So he's going to Watkins Glen for one. So he's doing that and studying for his MCATs and enjoying not having virtual classes. So yeah.
That's good. My son was in the Cuba Heights Fire. Service. They were really good about, really welcoming high school kids.
Yeah, they really do. And I joke because he was 5 when we moved here and we went to our, the open house fire day in October. And I remember him looking up at the chief and saying, "How old do you have to be to join?"
All right, I'm going to have to leave, so.
Okay, I'll stop.
We probably all do.
Thank you, Kate, for being here with us. Thanks, everybody.
Okay,
bye.
Thanks, Katrina and Brittany. Appreciate it. All right.
Move to adjourn second. Everybody agrees. Bye.
Bye.